My name is Nadia Voss. I turned 25 4 weeks ago. And I need to tell you what happened at Oleander's. The bread basket was still warm. That's the detail I keep coming back to. The bread was warm, the candles were lit, and my mother, the woman who raised me, was standing up from her chair with a smile I recognized as performance. I knew that smile. I'd been studying it my whole life. She tapped her champagne flute with one finger. The room went quiet. And 3 tables behind her, a woman I'd only met twice was watching me with the kind of eyes that already knew. My birth mother had been in the same restaurant for 40 minutes. She was there when we arrived. She had a reservation. She'd known. And what happened in the next 11 minutes is the reason I haven't spoken to my parents since. Before I take you back to the beginning, I want to ask you something. Have you ever sat in a room full of people who love you and felt completely alone inside it? Not unloved. Just unseen. Like the version of you they're celebrating isn't quite the one that lives in your chest. Drop your city and local time in the comments. I read every one. And stay with me, because this story takes a turn I still haven't fully processed. To understand Oleander's, I need to take you back to a kitchen in Maplewood, Ohio, when I was 7 years old. The Voss kitchen smelled like Murphy's oil soap and whatever candle my mother Diane had burning on the counter. There was always a candle. Vanilla in winter, lemon verbena in summer. The countertops were white quartz she'd picked out herself, the kind without a single vein in them. Perfect and cool and completely uniform. I used to press my palm flat against them after school. They never warmed up, no matter how long you held your hand there. My parents, Diane and Robert Voss, had adopted me at 3 days old through a private agency in Columbus. I knew this the way I knew my own birthday. It was a fact, stated clearly and without apology, framed as the most natural thing in the world. We chose you, Diane used to say, smoothing my hair back. Out of everyone. We chose you specifically. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Robert Voss was a corporate attorney. He drove a gray Audi, wore the same 4 ties in rotation, and communicated primarily through brief nods of approval or the particular way he set down his coffee mug when something displeased him. I learned to read his silences before I learned long division. He wasn't cruel. He was precise. Everything in his life had been selected for its function, including, I would eventually understand, me. The Voss family moved in a specific current. Country club membership. Fundraiser galas. The right school, the right sport, the right friends. And I was supposed to move with it, to be carried along by it, to eventually become a tributary that fed back into it. For most of my childhood, I tried. I played tennis, not because I loved it, but because the club had courts. I majored in business at Whitmore University, not because numbers moved me, but because Robert had gone to Whitmore and the trajectory was already drawn. I wore the clothes that photographed well. I smiled for the family Christmas card in front of the Maplewood house with its white trim and its wreath on the door and its absolute, architectural perfection. I was 22 before I started pulling on the threads. It started small. A genetics assignment in a biology elective I took to fill a credit. We were mapping inherited traits and I had, of course, nothing to map. No family medical history. No record of where my brown eyes came from or why my hands were shaped the way they were, long fingers, wide palms, nothing like Diane's neat, tapered ones. My professor suggested I contact the agency through which I'd been adopted. A formality, he said. Just for the assignment. I didn't tell my parents. The agency was called Sunrise Placement Services. Their office was on Farwell Street in Columbus, 2nd floor of a building that smelled like carpet cleaner and old paper. The caseworker's name was Patricia. She was unhurried, soft-voiced, and she slid a thin manila envelope across her desk with the gentleness of someone handing you something fragile. Inside was a non-identifying summary of my birth family. Maternal age at placement, 19. Health history, unremarkable. Reason for placement, unable to provide adequate care at this time. 3 sentences at the bottom, in the summary notes, stopped me. Birth mother expressed strong desire for future contact if the adoptee wished. Consent for contact on file. Contact registry registered as of placement date. I sat in that office for a long time after Patricia left to give me privacy. My parents had never mentioned a contact registry. Not once. In 22 years, not a single word. I drove back to Maplewood that evening and sat in my old bedroom, the one Diane had redecorated in pale gray and white when I left for college, her tastes finally allowed to overwrite mine, and I stared at the ceiling and thought about those 3 sentences. I didn't call the registry. Not yet. I put the envelope in the bottom of my desk drawer under 2 years of old notebooks, and I went back to school and I finished the semester and I graduated and I took a position at a marketing firm in Columbus because it was halfway between what Robert wanted and what I could tolerate, and I built a version of my life that looked right from the outside. But the envelope stayed in the drawer. And I want to pause here and ask you something. Have you ever found out something true, something you couldn't unknow, and had to decide whether to pull on that thread or leave it alone? Tell me in the comments. Because what I did next changed everything. I contacted the registry 6 months before my 25th birthday. Her name was Claire Ashworth. She was 43 years old and lived in Denton, Ohio, 40 minutes from Columbus. She'd registered for contact the same year she placed me. She'd been updating her contact information every 2 years without fail, for 22 years, making sure the door stayed open in case I ever walked through it. We met for coffee at a place called Burl and Birch on a Tuesday morning in November. I arrived first. I ordered a black coffee and then immediately changed it to a latte because I needed something to hold with both hands. She walked in wearing a green coat and she had my hands. That's the thing that broke something open in me. She had my hands. Long fingers, wide palms. She set her bag on the chair across from mine and she looked at me the way you look at something you've been afraid to want for a long time. We talked for 3 hours. Claire Ashworth was a middle school art teacher. She drove a 10-year-old Subaru. She had a younger brother named Marcus and a rescue dog named Fig and a small house with bookshelves that, she told me, were organized by color because it made the room feel warmer. She loved ceramic mugs and hiking and used to play guitar until she broke 2 fingers in a door. She laughed at the same pace I did, slowly, like she wanted to make sure something was actually funny before she committed to it. She had placed me because she was 19 and alone and broke. She had cried every birthday since. She had never stopped hoping. I drove home that evening with the windows down even though it was November. The cold felt necessary. I saw Claire 4 more times before Christmas. Coffee, then lunch, then a walk along the Olentangy River Trail where she told me about her parents, my biological grandparents, both still living in Denton, both aware she'd made contact and both cautiously, quietly glad. She showed me a photo on her phone. An older couple on a porch swing. The man had my nose. The woman had the specific way of sitting I have, slightly sideways, weight on one hip, like I'm always half ready to leave. I told my parents in January. We were at Sunday dinner at the Maplewood house. Diane had made her chicken marsala, the good china was out, Robert had opened a bottle from the burgundy case he kept in the basement. The candle was vanilla. Everything was exactly as it always was. I waited until the plates were clear. I've been in contact with my birth mother, I said. Her name is Claire. I've met her 5 times. I wanted you to know. The table went quiet in the specific way of rooms where something has been said that cannot be unsaid. Diane set her wine glass down with a click that was almost nothing. Robert looked at his plate. Then Diane said, very quietly, "Why would you do that to us?" Not a question. A statement. An accusation shaped like a sentence. I told them I wasn't doing anything to them. That I was curious about my own history. That it didn't change anything between us. Robert said, without looking up, "We gave you everything. And I said, I know. And I'm grateful. And this isn't about what you gave me. But it was. It was about exactly that. Because what they'd given me, the white countertops, the right school, the Christmas card with the perfect wreath, was a version of a life, not the material for one. And I had spent 25 years being grateful for something I hadn't chosen and performing a belonging I'd never quite felt. I didn't say all of that at the dinner table. I said, I'll call you this week. I drove home and I cried on my bathroom floor, not from sadness exactly, but from the particular exhaustion of having held something carefully for a very long time. The call that week was short. Diane said they needed time. Robert said nothing. I gave them time. And here's the thing I need you to hold on to as I tell you what happened next: I still loved them. I still do. Love and incompatibility are not mutually exclusive. Remember that. My 25th birthday was Robert's idea. He called me in February, 6 weeks after the dinner, and his voice was measured and deliberate in the way of someone who has been coached or at least has coached himself. We'd like to take you to dinner. Just the three of us. Oleander's. The good place, your grandmother's favorite. I should have felt the peace offering in it. I did feel it. I accepted. Oleander's is on Harmon Street in Columbus. It's the kind of restaurant that doesn't advertise. Dark wood, white tablecloths, candles in blown glass. It smells like garlic and old oak and something floral I've never been able to identify exactly. The bread comes warm in a cloth napkin. The room holds maybe 20 tables. We arrived at 7. Diane was wearing the blue dress she saves for occasions. Robert had his good jacket. They'd made the reservation weeks in advance. The maitre d' said my name when we walked in, and for a moment, just a moment, I thought, maybe this is what repair looks like. We were seated near the window. The bread arrived. The menus were placed. Robert ordered wine without asking what I wanted, which was familiar, which was almost comforting in its familiarity. We talked about small things. My apartment. A project at work. The Whitmore alumni dinner coming up in the spring that Robert wanted us to attend together, the three of us, like always. I was present and I was warm and I was doing the thing I've always done, meeting them where they were, adjusting my frequency to theirs, when I glanced past Diane's shoulder toward the back of the room. Table 14. Claire Ashworth was sitting at table 14. She was with two people I recognized from the photograph on her phone. Her parents. My biological grandparents. The man with my nose and the woman who sits sideways. There was a small birthday banner on the table. Handwritten. For someone who wasn't there yet. My heart went still. She's here for me. Not planned with my parents. Not planned as a confrontation. Claire had told me 2 weeks earlier she wanted to do something small for my birthday, something quiet, a gesture. I'd said I'd love that, I'd call her after my parents' dinner. She hadn't known about Oleander's. She'd just chosen the same restaurant on the same night. But Diane was looking at me now. Because whatever passed across my face in that half-second was enough. She turned. She saw Claire. And the way Diane's face changed, not to anger, not immediately, but to something more complicated and more final, a closing down, a door swinging shut, that is the image I carry now. That is the image I will probably carry for a very long time. Robert followed her gaze. He set down his wine glass. He looked at me. Did you arrange this? Not a question. Same cadence as Diane's at the dinner table in January. These two people, 25 years together, had developed the exact same way of delivering accusations as statements. I didn't, I said. I didn't know she was here. Diane's voice dropped to a register I'd only heard twice before. Both times I was a child and something in the house had broken. Nadia. You need to choose. The bread was still warm between us. The candles in the blown glass were lit. And I understood with a clarity that felt like stepping out of a building into cold air that she was not speaking in metaphor. She was not asking me to choose my feelings or my loyalties or my sense of identity. She was asking me to choose, right now, tonight, which table I was going to sit at for the rest of my life. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had smoothed my hair and kept the candles burning and redecorated my bedroom and chosen me specifically and given me everything and somehow, in all of that, forgotten to leave room for me to be anything other than grateful. Then I looked at Robert. He was already gesturing to the maitre d' for the check. He had already decided. I picked up my water glass. I took a slow sip. I set it down. I'm not choosing, I said. That's not a choice I'm willing to make. Diane stood up. Her napkin fell from her lap and neither of us moved to pick it up. Then we're done, she said. And her voice wasn't shaking. That was the part that surprised me. There was no tremor in it. She'd thought about this already. This sentence had already been prepared. Robert stood, laid 3 folded bills on the table, enough to cover the wine and the bread, and he buttoned his jacket. He didn't look at me again. They walked out. The room had gone the specific quiet of people pretending they haven't heard something. Silverware resumed. A wine glass lifted. The maitre d' appeared from somewhere and removed the bills from the table with professional speed. I sat. I didn't turn toward table 14. Not yet. I needed a moment to let the air settle back into the space my parents had occupied. The candle in front of me flickered once, for no visible reason, and went still. From across the restaurant, I heard a chair push back quietly. Then footsteps. Then a hand, warm and familiar, on my shoulder. Claire didn't say anything. She just stood there for a moment, her hand on my shoulder, steady as a doorframe. That was enough. The consequences unfolded the way consequences do, not dramatically, but consistently, one after another, each one clarifying something that had been blurred. Robert sent an email 4 days later. 2 paragraphs. The first said they loved me and wished me well. The second said that until I was ready to prioritize our family, it was best to give each other space. He'd CC'd their attorney, which I think was habit more than threat, but the gesture told me everything about how he processed pain, through documentation, through structure, through the instruments of control available to him. Diane did not write. Diane did not call. My aunt, Robert's younger sister, Carol, who I'd grown up eating Christmas breakfast with, texted me 2 weeks later. Just a row of 3 hearts. No words. I texted back 1 heart. That felt like all either of us could manage. At work, I told my closest colleague what had happened, a woman named Britt who had known me since my first week at the firm. She listened without interrupting, which is rarer than it sounds. Then she said, quietly and without any drama at all, "You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes the people who love you can only love the version of you that needs them." I've thought about that sentence almost every day since. Claire introduced me formally to her parents 3 weeks after Oleander's. We drove to Denton on a Sunday. The house was small, older, sided in pale yellow that had gone chalky at the edges. There were wind chimes on the porch. The inside smelled like coffee and dog and something baking I identified eventually as banana bread. Her father, my biological grandfather, whose name is Tom, shook my hand and then pulled me into a hug that lasted 4 seconds longer than I expected. Her mother, Ruth, had set out 3 different kinds of jam for the toast without knowing which ones I liked. "Just in case," she said. "Just in case you have a preference." I stood in that kitchen and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not chosen. Just included. There's a difference, I've learned. Being chosen implies there was a selection process, a deliberation, a moment where you might have been passed over. Being included just means the door was open and you walked through it and nobody made a ceremony of the fact. My half-brother, Claire's son from a relationship years later, is named Eli. He's 17. He plays bass guitar and has opinions about architecture, and the two of us spent an entire Sunday afternoon arguing about whether brutalism is beautiful or oppressive, and by the end we'd agreed it's both, which felt like the beginning of something. I don't have a resolution to give you about my parents. Not a clean one. Robert and I have exchanged 4 emails since Oleander's. They are polite and brief and read like correspondence between people who share a history but not a present. I reply within 2 days. I am not waiting for him to change. I'm not waiting for anything. I'm just keeping a door open, because keeping doors open is something I've decided to do with my life. Diane has not written. That silence lives in me the way old injuries do, not always painful, but present. Something you're aware of when the weather changes. Last month I drove to Denton on a Saturday morning and helped Claire hang shelves in her spare room. The windows face east and the light in there in the morning is the color of the inside of a peach. We worked for 2 hours and made mistakes and fixed them, and by the end the shelves were level and I was covered in plaster dust, and we sat on the floor and ate the banana bread Ruth had sent with me, and I thought about the Voss kitchen with its white quartz countertops that never warmed up. Later, in Claire's car before I drove home, she handed me something small wrapped in tissue paper. It was a ceramic mug she'd made herself. Brown glaze, slightly irregular, the kind of imperfect thing that takes more skill than it looks like. On the bottom, she'd carved 3 letters in the clay before firing it. NVA. Nadia Voss Ashworth. Both names. Both of them. Together, without hierarchy. I turned it over in my hands for a long time. I didn't cry in the car. I waited until I was on Route 40 heading back to Columbus, windows down even though it was cold, and then I let it come, not a collapse, just a release, the kind that happens when something that's been held tightly is finally, carefully, set down. Here's what I know now that I didn't know at 24. Identity is not a betrayal. Knowing where you came from doesn't diminish where you've been. Your history isn't a referendum on the people who raised you, it's just the whole truth, which is larger than any one family's version of it. I think about that restaurant sometimes. 20 tables, 2 families, 1 person sitting at the intersection of both, being asked to draw a line. I didn't draw it. I refused. And that refusal cost me something real, something I'm still grieving in the ordinary way you grieve things, not constantly, but in waves, usually when I smell vanilla candles or see a gray Audi in a parking lot. But grief and rightness can live in the same house. They've been living in mine since February. There's a kind of love that holds you so tightly it forgets to leave room for you to breathe. And there's a kind of love that just keeps updating its contact information, quietly, every 2 years, making sure the door is still findable. Both kinds are real. Both kinds hurt in their own way. I'm learning to hold both without letting either one tell me who I am. I want to ask you one question before you go. Is there a version of yourself, a true version, a whole one, that someone in your life has never been allowed to meet? Tell me in the comments. I read them all, and I mean that. If this story reached you somewhere real, share it with someone who might need it. And if you want to hear the next one, I'd be glad to have you here. Not because I need you to subscribe, but because some stories are better told to people who are actually listening. The mug is on my desk right now. NVA. Both names. All of it. That's enough.